Happy Mother's Day. We are so grateful to have you here with us, whether you're in the room or watching online. We are in the midst of a series we're doing called Weeds in My Garden. And the title of the series actually comes from a set of lyrics that were written by Kendall Inskeep. Some of you may know her. She was on America's Got Talent. She had a song called Honest, and the song was really reflections of conversations that she was having with God. And this is some of the lyrics, and this is kind of, again, the inspiration for this series. She writes these words. She says, I tell you that I'm whole, but I'm still healing. I tell you that I'm happy, but I'm grieving. I thought I was a fighter. I'm still in the fire. But if I'm being honest, I'm not being honest. I'll give you roses just hoping that you don't see the weeds in my garden. Now, the weeds that we are talking about in the garden of our lives throughout this series are really some of the mental health struggles, some of the lies that take root in our bodies, in our souls, and in our minds. 2 weeks ago, we kind of kicked the whole thing off, and we talked about kind of some common myths that are attached to mental health struggles. And kind of the key takeaway from that is if you are someone who struggles with mental health and you are a Christian, it doesn't make you a bad Christian. It makes you a Christian who wrestles with mental health. Last week, we talked about anxiety, and we talked about some of what that does to our bodies, some of what we wrestle with. We talk about worry and how we deal with some of those things. As we continue this morning, we're going to talk about stress and burnout. And I know that's one of those things like we can all relate to, but the truth is, as moms, I think we can definitely relate to this topic. Because being a mother is a truly thankless job. There is an invisible load that comes with being a mom, sort of the mental and emotional daily labors that moms carry. Whether it's planning meals, remembering appointments, manage everyone in the household's feelings, including the men, keeping the household running. Again, often all of this goes without acknowledgement. I was talking to my wife last night, and she was helping me understand a little bit about what motherhood is like. She says, okay, I want you to imagine a complex future. That what moms are doing is they're imagining a complex future, and then they're reverse engineering that future to the next right move that needs to happen today. And the problem is, every single moment, that complex future is constantly changing. And so you're projecting out, you're reverse engineering, this is what we need to do, but this changes, and so you do this over and over again. And then she looked at me and she said, welcome to the metaverse. And I'm like, I don't get it. That's super difficult. That's like, yeah, but that's what moms do. Like, you are managing so much. And as we said, it is a thankless job. And so moms, thank you for all that you do. For the lives that you're impacting. For the difference that you make. As the video says, we see. Even though moms can relate to stress and burnout, it's not just an issue for moms. You see, the reality is we live in a world that demands a lot of us. We live in a world where it's go, 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 and it puts us in this place, and see if this relates to you, where you sort of feel like you always have to be on. You always have to be available, and it's just kind of comes with the territory of being a human in our world today, that we accept it as normative, but the truth is it's not how we were designed to function. Like, we live with this perception that we're supposed to be always on, but we cannot physically live that way over time. Eventually, we break down. Eventually, we burn out. And so kind of the hope is, like, how do we begin to identify some of the triggers? How do we help create space where we can tackle these issues before we find ourselves in a place of burnout? Now, when I say like we've all wrestled with it, I've dealt with this in my own life. A few years ago, I was in an incredibly busy season of life where it just felt like it was like get up and go, and then like get up and go to bed and get up and go, and I would just do this day after day, sort of rinse and repeat. It was Groundhog's Day. There was a lot that was going on at work, and I needed to get it done, and there was the next thing, and the next thing, and the next thing. And again, this went on for an extended season of time where I just pushed and pushed. And I don't know if you've ever been in this place, but at first, it feels incredibly exhilarating. Like, because I like to accomplish things. Like, when there's a goal, I want to push towards that goal. When there's things that need to get done, I love checking things off my list to get things done. And so when I get into a season like this, my natural tendency is to like dive right in, and there's joy and excitement about tackling the task or taking new ground. But what I began to realize is over time, as days turned into weeks and as weeks turned into months, as this began to go on, a lot of my sort of joy began to wane. And I was less patient, got more frustrated at things. And I remember right about this time in the season of my life, I got sick. And like just like a cold, nothing too bad, enough to like shut me down for a few days. And I remember like when it first came on, like I was super frustrated, like I'm sick and I got to get this done, I got things to do. And then I was like in bed and I was like, this is kind of nice. Like, this is good. It was like the cold gave me the excuse that I needed to like just slow down for a couple days, to stop pushing. And after the few days laying in bed and then getting better, guess what? I felt better. And I'm like, all right, let's go. And so I would like go after this thing again, and I would just tackle it day after day after day. And then inevitably, after a period of time, I'd get sick. And I'd lay in bed for a few days, and it was just kind of the rest and rejuvenation I needed. And I started to notice a pattern developing in my life. Like I wasn't good, and I'm still not good at sort of identifying when stress is growing in my life, but I knew there was a pattern. Run hard, get sick. Run hard, get sick. And every time I got sick, it was just a few days of rest that I needed to continue running hard after things. Now, again, I said I started to notice this pattern developing in my life, and it was a crazy season for me. And I kind of got jumped back into things that I was going. At one point, I calculated, it was like a month and a half, and I hadn't taken a day off. Like, I'm not proud of that. It's just, this was the reality of the life that I was in that season. And I remember I came home one day, and I said this out loud. Don't ever say this out loud. I kind of walked in the house, and I was like, man, I need to get sick. Now, my wife, I shared this week one, she's like a mental health therapist. Like, don't ever say that out loud to a therapist. She's like, what? And I was like, I'm just busy. She's like, I know. I'm like, I need to get sick so I can get some rest. And like, obviously, like I realized how like distorted that is. And like how out of whack my life had become. But the truth is, for so many of us, we can do the same thing. Like maybe you're not hoping you get sick, but as people, we just run and run and run. It's go, go, go. Pile on the tasks, the things that we have to do, the things that we want to do. There's no shortage of these things. And the problem is, as we go through life, it can start to get really difficult to tell the difference between what we have to do and what we want to do. And even more so, we begin to sort of almost like spiritualize the have-tos. We start to think, okay, well, like this is something, it's so good, why would I ever say no to it? And so like I look at my job, right? Like again, I'm passionate about what I do, and I believe what I do has eternal consequences. And so almost every task, I can be like, well, I have to do this because eternity is on the line. Again, we can begin to elevate some of the have-tos and the want-tos to be greater in our lives than they were ever sort of meant to be. And again, it's not just work. We'll just look at kids, right? Because it's Mother's Day. Kids are so important. So we tell ourselves, our kids are so important, which they are. We say our kids absolutely deserve the best, which they do. But then we say, okay, well, because of our kids they deserve the best, and because our kids are so important, well, then I have to do X, Y, or Z for them. I need to make sure that they have sort of everything they want in life, or I want to do X, Y, and Z for them. And these want tos and have tos and all of this, they're not inherently a bad thing. Like us wanting to do good at work, us wanting to honor and serve our kids, like these are not inherently bad things. But here's what I need us to understand. And this is one of the greatest triggers to stress in our life, is when the have tos and the want tos, and whatever that is in your life, what the have tos and the want tos, when those take place and precedent over you. Right? Like they're good things, but we end up sacrificing ourselves in the process of these things. When we give over ourselves to these things, when we give away our agency, if you will, our stress increases and burnout is right around the corner. And if you go through a season like this, an extended period of time, you'll find yourself running on empty. Now, I've kind of said this all throughout this series. I'm a pastor. I'm not a mental health professional. And as such, as we look at these topics, as we looked at last week, as we look at worry and anxiety, as we look at stress and burnout, we're going to do so through the lens of Scripture. And specifically today, we're going to look at a story that's found in the Old Testament, in particular, a story that is found in the book of 1 Kings chapter 19. For a bit of context for you guys, Elijah has just led the people of Israel to a decisive victory over the prophets of Baal. It's just like crazy and powerful story. You should read it, 1 Kings 19, or 1 Kings 18. You should read that. We're not going to get into that today, but here's what you kind of need to know that sets the stage for what we're looking at today. Elijah, in the midst of this battle, as Elijah leads the people of Israel, he does everything right. He listened and obeyed God. He cared for others. He prayed boldly and persistently. He stood in courageous faith. Like he did what God asked him to do. And as we get to chapter 19, this should be Elijah's shining moment. Like this is where he gets to celebrate his faithfulness. But if you know anything about this story, it's not what happens. For Elijah, instead of stepping into the moment, he flees. Elijah runs for his life. He's afraid of what Queen Jezebel might do to him. And that's where we pick up the story in chapter 19. We're going to start in verse 4. And as we kind of engage with the story, what's clear is Elijah is overwhelmed. Elijah, he's stressed out. Like he's just fought this decisive battle. God has delivered them. He's freaked out that Jezebel's going to come after him. And so he runs away. And he takes this respite, this moment of peace where God sort of meets him in this moment as Elijah just begins to pray. And he says these. He says, Lord, I've had enough. Take my life. For I am no better than my ancestors who have already died. And I just want you to just ride the roller coaster with him for a moment. Like mountaintop. God shows up. Decisive victory. Fast forward just a few moments, a few ticks forward in his life, and he's like praying, and he's like, God, I don't want to go on. Like literally just take my life, Lord. I have had enough. Like the words that are coming out of Elijah's mouth, these outward expressions are just revealing the inner turmoil that he's experiencing inside. Now we see this throughout Scripture, but God is a merciful God. God is a compassionate God. And in this moment for Elijah, the same is true. As Elijah sort of prays these prayers, God sends angels to meet Elijah, and when they do, they bring provisions because he needed something to eat. He needed food to help sustain him on this journey. But it's not just that the angels come and provide food for Elijah. They also encourage him. They tell him to continue on. Essentially, God's not done with you yet. And they give Elijah the direction to go to Mount Sinai. And some of you might be familiar with that term. Mount Sinai is also referred to as the mountain of God. And so Elijah receives this message. He sort of gets up, he's got energy, and he starts continuing on this journey. But now he knows where he's going. He's not just running and fleeing, he's going to where God has asked him to go. He heads to Mount Sinai, and we pick up in verse 9. There he came to a cave where he spent the night. But the Lord said to him, "What are you doing here, Elijah?" Elijah replied, "I have zealously served the Lord God Almighty." Now, let me just pause here. Elijah does what we do. Like, God asked him a pretty clear and direct question. And what Elijah does in the process of answering is sort of build his own resume up. He's like, look, God, look what I did. I have zealously served you, but the people of Israel, not me, those people have broken their covenant with you. They tore down your altars. They killed every one of your prophets. I am the only one left. And then he finally answers the question. Why am I here? Because they're trying to kill me too. He's like, God, I did everything right. I did what you asked me to do, and now my life is on the line. Like, this is the reality of my worlds in this moment. And some of you are really familiar with this story. For some of you, this might be the first time you've encountered this story, but as a sort of refresher, let me just kind of walk us through the rest of it. Elijah is in this cave. He's sleeping and resting for the night, and he's told that God is about to pass by. That he's supposed to go out to the mount of the cave where God is about to pass by. And sure enough, he goes out to the sort of the entrance of the cave. God sort of passes by, as the text says, and then there is a mighty wind. Like a violent wind, the kind of crazy windstorms that we have around here every once in a while. Like, things are moving, rocks are falling. And the text says, even in the midst of all of that, the power of the wind, where you think, well, this is where God is in, it says God's not in the wind. Then we're told that there is an earthquake that happens. And the ground shakes, a violent earthquake, but the text says that God is not in the earthquake. And then the third thing is there's this third moment where there's a fire that sort of breaks out and things are burning. And fires can be devastating and overwhelming, and there's a lot of power and force in a fire. And surely you're like, well, God would be in the fire, but the text says God's not in the fire. Now, we're going to press pause here because this is a key part to Elijah's story that I think gets missed. Is that Elijah keeps showing up. Like, how many times in our lives, and I can acknowledge, I've done this in my life, where I'm like, God, I need you in this moment. And so we show up and we're like, God, you show up right now on my time. If you could just reveal yourself to me, do your thing right here and right now, then I'll know you're real. Then I'll feel this connection, God, right here. And then when God doesn't show up, we're like, oh, I can't trust God. I asked God to deliver, and God didn't deliver. And this is Elijah. He's just, all right, I'm here. The wind? Nope. All right. He doesn't give up. He shows back up. All right, God, I'm okay. Nope. Not in the earthquake. All right. And he just continues to show up until God does what God says he's going to do. And we're told that Elijah is in the cave. And it's there in the cave that he hears the gentle whisper of God. You see, it's in the stillness. It's in the quiet that God encounters Elijah. What I think is so profound about this is that when you look at Elijah's life, everything he needed to sustain his outward life happened inside that cave. Like the connection that he had with God, that brought everything in his life into perspective. That empowered him to carry out the life he was called to from that day forward. And I think there's this imagery of Elijah in his life and the cave that so clearly mirrors our lives. Because I think as people, when we talk about stress and we talk about burnout, we think about life as two separate things. There's sort of the outward life and all the things that are happening around us, all the things that are being thrust upon us, and then there's sort of the inward life. This is maybe what we feel in some part that we're in control of, and we're trying to find the balance of what happens outside in life and what happens inside in the cave of our lives. And here's where I thought it would be a little bit fun to kind of do an object lesson together. Are we okay with this? We can do an object lesson? Don't all jump at this at one time. All right, when you came in, there was a piece of paper in the kind of the sleeve in front of you in your chair. Go ahead and grab it. This wasn't for you to take notes, and unless you took notes, that's good. And if you made this into a paper airplane, I'm really impressed, because this is not the perfect sort of paper to make it an airplane. Anyways, okay, so here's what we do. Look at one side of the paper, and that sort of represents your inward life. And the other side of the paper represents your outward life. And because we know that life is cyclical, we tend to kind of put this together and we think, all right, well, this is our life, right? And everything that happens on the inside of life is one thing, and there's the outside part of our life, and that's totally different. Again, we live functionally that these are two different spaces of life. And so we kind of go through life and we're okay, if we need to control stress, we've got two sort of mechanisms to do it. It's do we control what's happening on the inside, or do we try to control what's happening on the outside? Do we try to control what's happening on the inside? Now, here's what happens. And generally speaking, as people, this is kind of broadly speaking true, is we are more prone to focus on the life on the outside because it's what other people see the most. Right? We can be pretty good at neglecting the inner life. We're just trying to protect and present the outer life so that people can kind of see us as, hey, this is a good person and good standing, is a good citizen. They work hard. Look, they love Jesus. And we'll put on really good exteriors, but the inside of our lives can be an absolute mess. Now I'll get to where I'm going with this. What's the date? It was a long time ago in a galaxy far, far away. In 1858, a German mathematician named August Mobius found this mathematical phenomenon that is not found in nature, yet it is a part of the sort of natural created order of things. Mobius didn't create something that had never been before. He kind of stumbled upon something that God had created, and with it became this mathematical principle. But more than just a mathematical principle, it helps us as people, I think, understand how God has designed us and built us to walk through life. And I think the reason, or one of the key reasons that we deal with stress, one of the key reasons that we wrestle with burnout is because we operate life like it's like this, even though it's not how we were created to live. And so this is a mathematical principle that is actually a visual principle. So I have a picture. This is what is referred to here as a Mobius strip. Has anyone ever seen this before? Okay. Is anyone I've seen that, but it's the infinity sign, Mike. You got it all wrong, right? Very similar principles. The infinity sign is sort of this endless nature of things. The infinity sign is the continuity of things. The Mobius strip is very similar. There's a continuity to all of life. It kind of blends together. And if you take your piece of paper right here, now this is where it gets complicated. Ready? We can do this. I think we've all done this. You take your piece of paper and you literally flip one side and reconnect. That's all you got to do. And now you got this really wonky circle that is bothering everyone with OCD. Yeah, I'm how do I straighten this out? This is what you've done before you, is you've created the Mobius strip. And I'm actually suggesting that this is how God has designed us to live and function. That there isn't sort of the external life, and there is then the internal life, that all of life sort of blends together as one. And so here's what I want you to do. I want you to take your finger, and I want you just to trace the exterior of this Mobius strip. And as you do, what do you find? It becomes the interior. Because that's how God designed us. We're running around living and functioning like through life, like there's the exterior and then there's the interior. And we're living these divided lives, and God's like, no, that's not how I built you. That there's not this external life and then there's this internal life. No, like this is just life. This is who we are. And when we try to break it up and divide it into different pieces of life, we find ourselves in places where we get stressed out. We find ourselves in places where we get burnt out, because true change, and this is a biblical principle, true change happens from the inside out. The problem with so many of us is we're trying to go through life changing the outside and hope it bleeds into the inside. And so functionally, and I'm not putting anybody on the spot, this is what I do. What I do is when I'm stressed, and I get seasons of stress, I begin to build exterior walls that help sort of give me space and time to sort of reset and rest, right? And so I'm like, okay, I'm super busy at work, and so what I'm going to do is when I go home at 5 o'clock, I'm shutting off all notifications. Or after 5 o'clock and on the weekends, I'm never checking my emails or voicemails. Can anyone else relate to this? Right? Cool. Thank you. 2. We can participate, people. I'm walking around up here with this like funky circle. We can all participate. Right? So like we build these exterior walls, or like it's not just work, right? It's like with our friends, like we're in a busy season and we're like, okay, I'm not gonna I'm only gonna hang out with my friends this time, or I'm only gonna give my kids these days, and like we're trying to find balance. But here's the problem. Here's the problem when you live a divided life, is the walls that you build on the outside don't matter unless you've given your heart permission to say no on the inside. Right? Because I don't check my notifications. I don't check my email, and then I finally get to it, and I've missed 10 emails, and it was something important, and then my heart says, you should have checked that email. You should have been present. Someone needed you, and you weren't there in that moment. You should have been there for them. And so suddenly, it doesn't matter what the walls on the outside say, because my heart's telling me that I failed. Right? Like if you really want change, you have to start with the inside. The walls are just part of it, but the walls will never be the solution, because just like the outside bleeds inside, the principle of the inside becoming the outside is true as well. It flows from inside us. It flows out of a heart that understands boundaries. It flows out of a heart that realizes I actually have capacity, like a limit to the things that I can do, which we're not prone to do as people. Like one of the oddest things, but honestly one of the most inspiring things that I encounter when I talk with people is when someone says, hey, that's really great. I don't have the capacity to do that. And I'm like, you can say that? You can say no? And I think, that, again, part of the reason why we experience so much stress in our lives is because we don't feel like we can say no. We don't feel like we can put a boundary. What a boundary is the boundary says, look, I'm drawing the line. And no matter what happens outside of this is the decision I'm making. Like no matter what my kids need, this is the decision I'm making. No matter what my work needs, this is the decision I'm making. No matter what life needs, this is the decision I'm making. Until we're willing to draw boundaries in our life, we will constantly find ourselves up against it. We're like, man, I'm stressed out. I'm on the edge of burnout. I got so much going on, because the boundary is our heart saying, I have capacity. It's us caring for the inside of our lives, like Jesus made us to. Knowing that when we prioritize ourselves, when we focus on what God is doing in us, eventually, like I said, the inside works its way. Now my thing's all funky. The inside works its way to the outside, right? Like it's all connected together. Let me ask you a question. How much of your life is driven by have to? And right, it's not all bad. Like how much of your life is driven by I want to? And the answer, if it's like a lot of my life, most of my life, like if you feel like you're being driven by I have to do this or I want to do this, even if they're good things, there is no amount of external walls that you can build that is going to help. The problem, though, is we don't know which ones to listen to, right? Because they all seem like good things by and large. We're like, well, I have to do these things for my kids. I have to do these things for my work, or I want to do these things. Like we start to think, okay, they all seem like good things. How do we know the ones that we should say yes to and the ones that we should say no to? Because if we can't make that delineation, then we're either going to say no to everything, which is an option, or we're going to be stressed because we say yes to everything. And I think in part of this, we just need to acknowledge that our lives are loud. Like we're just so busy, it's hard for us to discern the difference. Is it toil or is it stress? And toil is not a word that we use a lot, but it's a biblical principle. Like toil is hard work. We're told as people, part of the reality that we experience in the world that we live in today is that we will toil. Toil is hard work, but stress is imprisonment. Toil can be for a season, but stress, it just eats at us. It just contains us, and we just go and we go and we go until we collapse or get sick and experience a few days of rest. So again, the question is, how do we know which one we say yes to and which ones that we say no to? And I think what I would say to you is, what inner voice is being stoked in that moment? If it's the voice of God, it is going to reflect the things of God in you. Like if the voice is coming from God, what you need to do and what you want to do, it's going to reflect Him in you. It's going to reflect His goodness, His grace, His mercy. If it's the enemy's voice that's speaking up in those moments that makes you feel like you have to do these things, the enemy is going to appeal to your pride, to your ego, and probably this is the enemy's greatest weapon, your guilt. In any situation, if the inner voice is telling you, you're not doing enough, you're not enough, you're not loving your kids enough, you're not working hard enough, if the inner voice in these moments that you're trying to discern, what do I decide? If it's bringing about guilt, it's not of God. And I know for me that voice can be really loud at times. Like, I got to do this. I should do this. I need to do this. And I'm trying to justify it as a spiritual thing, but it's really a pride thing. It's an ego thing. It's a guilt and shame thing. And here's what I'd say. If that voice speaks loudly in your life, I'm going to encourage you to rebuke that voice. And instead invite you to turn to the voice of Jesus, who says these words in Matthew 11, verse 28. He says, "Come to me, all you who are weary and carry heavy burdens, and I will give you rest." The word rest there in the Bible doesn't mean to take a nap. It doesn't mean to get a good night break. In the original language, it's the Greek word anapao, and that word rest literally means renewal. It's the kind of rest, it's the kind of renewal that only comes from God, the renewal that comes from within. And it happens as we prioritize God, as we allow Him to speak into our inner lives that flow out to our external lives, our outward lives. And here's the thing, like I mentioned, we're all busy. We all have 1,000 things that are going on. Like some of you right now are like, I got 10 things on a checklist that need to happen by 2 o'clock today. So Mike, if you'd wrap this up, I got you on a clock. You're almost out of time already. Let's go. We're so busy and we're so good at neglecting the inner life that we think, it's okay. God knows I love Him. And so if there's anything I can sacrifice in this season, I'll sacrifice my time with God because He understands where my heart is. And so I'm just going to kind of put God aside and focus on these things. And what we're doing is we put God aside. We're putting the source of our life on the bench. We're allowing the pressures of the world, because that's what's driving us, and our schedules, that's what's driving us to bleed into our inner lives, instead of saying, God, you first. And from you flows everything out in our lives. The inner life, I just said. The inner life will either feed the outer life, or the outer life will feed the inner one. And here's the thing. You get to choose. And like stress and burnout, with it comes the lie that you don't have a choice. But you always have a choice. You get to draw the boundary. You get to choose God. You have a choice. An author by the name of Lisa Turkis, she would say this. She would say, spending time with God puts everything else into perspective. It silences the lies, the self-lies, the enemy's lies, the world's lies. She says it silences the lies and settles the soul. Christine Kane, who's a Christian speaker and activist, she'd put it this way. She would say, you don't need more hours in the day, which is what we think. Like, you need a few more hours. Like, if I have a few more hours, I can get a few more things done. No, she says, you need more of God in your hours. And as we wrap up this morning, that's literally what we want to do. Like, we want to give you a gift to commune with God. Really to create this intentional space for you to meet with your Savior. To have a moment of quiet. A place for rest. And the thing is, some of you don't know what to do with quiet. And I find myself in that boat. I get really uncomfortable with quiet. Because when it's quiet, I have to face what's going on the inside. Right? So I just like to keep it busy. Keep it busy, keep it going, keep it moving. Then I never have to reflect and acknowledge the ways in which I have sort of sacrificed my inner life at the sake of, or for the sake of productivity in the outward life. And so if you're like me, maybe this is a space for you just to shut it down and attempt to be present in this moment. And maybe you're thinking, like, wait, Mike, like, we're going to have a quiet time. Like, what am I supposed to do in that quiet time? And again, this is just the pressures of the world in which we live in that we think that we have to do. I'm not asking you to do anything. I'm just asking you to be. Like, to sit in the space. To allow God to meet you in this moment. It's an intentional opportunity for us to slow down. As long as we're going at the speed that we go at, we will be stressed. And if we don't slow down, we're going to burn out. And so this is just a place just to slow down. Again, to commune with God. And even as we do this over the next couple of moments, because again, I fight this in myself all the time. It's like, well, how's this going to be productive? Like, what am I going to get out of it? And then here's what I'm going to go out on a limb. We're going to do this, and some of you are going to be like, I didn't get anything out of it. God didn't meet me in the moment. But here's the principle. You're building a muscle. And as you build the muscle, with it comes the discipline. To sit before God and just say, God, I'm asking you to slow down my life. God, I'm asking you to slow down my mind and let me just receive from you. Let me just be present before you. Knowing if I don't deal with what's happening on the inside, I will always be overrun by the pressures of what's happening outside the cave of my life. And if you're here like today and you're like, I'm not a follower of Jesus, this is all real weird. I get it. But here's what I know, because you're not that much different than me or the rest of us. Like, you're busy. And so, like, this is a space for you just to have a little bit of quiet. And maybe if you're bold enough, that you would ask God to meet you in this moment. So for the next few minutes, I'm just going to turn this over to you. You invite God to speak into your heart and into your soul.